So we're going to go over the question, what is flexion and extension? And we're going to be discussing this all in the lead wrist for any player, your glove hand. For right-handed players, that's left. For the opposite left-handed players, that would be the right. Lead hand, we're going to be talking about what is the difference between what the wrist is able to do, an action of slap a person, slap, that would be flexion, you're stretching the wrist right now, and this side of the other slap, slap, that would be extension. That would be bending the wrist right now. Extend, bend, flex, stretch. They used to call it bow and cup, which sounds retarded in my opinion, because I don't know why that looks like a cup. What the hell it has to do with cupping anything, or why that's bowing. I don't know why that would be bowing. Okay, so this is flexion purely, and this would be extension. Okay, if you looked at it from that side, the slapping action. Then you also have, let's say, shake a hand. Okay, down cock, up cock. Football is ulnar radial. Okay, so your underbone is your ulnar bone, so ulnar deviation, meaning you're just down cocking. Up cocking, that would be our radial bone, that's radial deviation. So your wrist can shake a hand, it can slap somebody. Okay? All sports, and we're going to come back to this question, we're going to ask if they are all more flexion, extension actions or twisting actions of the forearm. So when you actually twist your forearm downwards with your hand, that's pronation. That's pouring soup out. Okay? And then twisting the forearm up or lead arm to the left, that would be supination. Pouring soup into your hand. Are all sports twisting actions? Or are all sports flexion extension actions? Football is purely ulnar radial. Basketball is 100% flexion extension. Throw a ball in baseball, you're in trail extension into flexion when you throw. Okay? And let's say baseball, when you swing, your lead wrist is extended, and as you load up, you're flexing it into a snap extension, just like in, let's say, even hockey. Hockey players start out with a whole lot of flexion and ulnar first, and they come through, and as they abduct that lead arm, that wrist is extending like crazy, especially like a wrist shot, from flexion to extension. Somebody told me in lacrosse that you would go like this, and that would be twisting the arm, and I'm like, nope, flexion extension, even when you cradle in lacrosse, before you flex and extend that lead wrist, okay? Flexion extension, especially in golf, when you move your wrist in the downswing, not extend first, but it's in flex, that would help close the face, extend with opened, close would be that flexion and ulnar, so stretching it and down cocking, okay? And then you're 100% going to go from that flex into that extend. So you're flipping it, okay? Scott Coates, one of the best teachers in the world, PJ instructor here in Canada in 2019, he did a study on all his tour pros to determine what are the 4 common wrist release patterns done with hack motion. And it showed that 3 of the 4 had a clear flexion to extension release pattern / so many coaches over the years have called it don't scoop. So let's just say there's the cliche today, don't flip or don't scoop. I call BS to all the coaches out there and say that that's not what happens with the majority of the release patterns. He did say there was, let's say, a Tommy Fleetwood who's slightly extended and maintained flexion because he's able to turn his hips that much at impact and maintain flexion a little longer before essentially going to extension one way or the other. They all go into extension at the end, okay? Has to. Nobody's going like this and holding flexion and ulnar, all weird like. Even when Tiger hits that cut shot, he's not necessarily holding it off like that. There's a handle drag if we had it. We'll come back to that one. Handle dragging, we'll come back to there. But here's a good way to look at that. Most players, sure, they probably need some work in, let's say, pivot and slide structure. Could be very viable for some players that need to work on it. But if you can't close your face, or you have trouble, let's say, brushing the grass and controlling your ground strike, you need to use your wrist better. So here's a drill I use with some students sometimes that'll help them with their wrist actions. Just make a simple back and forth action that you can hit to about a 20, 30-yard shot. So that would be called back and forth brushes, and it'll look like this. Not a lot of arm action. See, I brush in about the same spot every time. And my wrist is going from flex to extend. You can go from stretch it, flip it, stretch it, flip it. And just going back and forth with not very large arm actions. Doesn't have to be fast. Trying to learn how to actually use your wrist actions correctly. It's vital in the golf swing, and very much one of the better release patterns for the average golfer. Let's just say Scott Coates in that study said this: a player that maintains a little bit of flexion, the average golfer couldn't do it because their hands would get blown up at impact, meaning they shank the ball or go somewhere weird, and it's just really hard for them to maintain that flexion and ulnar. Hockey players are usually pretty good at it because their gloves are even formed there, and they get great at closing the base and holding that flexion and ulnar as they come in to that slap shot. Okay? So after you do those little back and forth brushes, set up to a small little 20 or 30-yard shot. Try and make the exact same swing. And you'll be able to hit nice, crisp little wedge shots. Okay? That's the point first. I want players to learn how to do this with their lob wedge or sand wedge back and forth to get better at the action that controls what is most important, hands and arms actions first. Another one of my favorite instructors, Craig Hocknell, said that a player with phenomenal pivot and slide skills, but average hands and arms, will never get better than a 10 handicap. I totally agree. But if you had a player who had phenomenal hands and arm skills, especially trail arms, since all sports are trail arm sports, I'll go do that in another video, instead of that left arm straight stuff you always hear, which is a horrible tip. Basically, hands and arms, he said, if you had somebody with great hands and arms and only average pivot and slide, they could easily get down to a single-digit handicap or better. Both are eventually very necessary. It can have effects on a player. I'm not saying that you don't need to work on a more centered pivot, how the knees work, knee flex change. We'll come into another video on that. And making sure you actually get the pressure across in a slide, tilts, bends, all those things. We'll come back into that. I got very clever ways to explain them. Hope it helps while everybody's going crazy here in Armageddon. And visit me at swingplane.biz. Have a great day and stay safe, everybody.